Finance Committee meeting of the Foundation for Excellence. I am Dr. Angela Graham-Williams, President of the Board of Directors. However, in Director McFarland's absence, I'll be presiding today. It is 2:08 p.m. and I'd like to officially call the meeting to order.
Excellent.
Okay, so as we progress down the agenda, I would like to ask for an approval, for a motion for an approval of the minutes of our April 27th, 2020 meeting, which is our previous and most recent Finance Committee meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Director Washington. Thank you, Director Carroll. It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? Hearing that there is none, I would like to call for a vote for the approval of our meeting of April 20th, 2020 of the Finance Committee of the Kalamazoo Foundation for Excellence. All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing that there are none, the motion carries. I apologize. I was hoping to pull up the agenda on my phone, but I couldn't get the link to go through. So I'll just wait for you to toggle back and forth if that's okay.
I'll try to keep everyone from getting motion sick as I scroll.
No worries. Reports and communications.
Beautiful. And with this, I'll scroll down to the quarterly endowment report. There will be some paging between the sheets of it, so I'll try and go slowly. And CFO Steve Asenzi will walk us through the parts of the report. And Steve, just prompt me as you see fit to move between, so I'm not jumping around.
Sure.
As a background reminder here, and I'll point this out in the agenda item itself, is that this is building on the background is that the process that was started in the second half of 2019 to complete the administrative and procedural aspects of the Foundation for Excellence Endowment so that it's ready to continually build through the fundraising parts of the endowment building to be a fully functioning endowment was completed, and we're now at the first formal report phase. We previewed this report at the last board meeting and at the preceding Finance Committee meeting to look at the level of detail that people would be interested in seeing, keeping in mind, of course, that these records are all transparent, and the Finance Committee and board are fully entitled to request more information or special reports as see fit. So what you'll see is going to be the standard quarterly report that we'll be seeing, and that will then be shared with the board if approved by the Finance Committee as part of the Finance Committee report at the board meeting. So just a little bit of background there. Feel free to ask for more follow-up. And with that, I'll scroll down to the actual report dated June 30th and start on page 1 here.
All right, so I'll step in here. Page 1 here has a general summary of the quarter. I want to step back a little bit from where this starts. We'd received the original gift in early March of this year, came in at about 86 million. Obviously, we know where March went with the stock market, and by the time we were able to sell in the State Street account, we sold for 81 million. And from there, we were able to reinvest into 2 different funds, an equity fund with BlackRock, which tracks the S&P 500, and a bond fund with Jennison. And our goal there is to try to stay at a 50-50 split. We had a little bit of difference there. Some funding was, we were preparing, leaving some funding in cash to pay for expenses. And so it wasn't quite 50-50, but we'll go through rebalancing occasionally and get that back to the targeted goal of 50% in each fund. So kind of following through there, you can see where, we had a good rest of the quarter, trying to kind of just follow through. Overall, we had an increase of about 5.5 million. I do want to provide an update to that too as well. This is as of June 30th. As of July 31st, the fund had a balance of about 91 million. So definitely have seen the good sides of where the market has been the last few months. And so now we're in that positive area where we like to be with the investment. Overall, not a whole lot to really go over here. So if we want to scroll to the next page, 2 pages down, go to the pie chart. So this is just another view of our investments. Kind of going to go over in detail. Usually I don't spend a lot of time, but being the first quarter, I want to kind of get everyone familiar with the reports. Just kind of shows some different aspects. You know, largely you can see where our geographic exposure is. We're 100% in the US at the moment. What our asset classes are between equity and fixed income. And then you can kind of see we highlight here the allocation in comparison to the benchmark for Jennison. Normally not too much to call out here, I think, except for this time, there is a bit of a call out. Jennison usually tracks the benchmark. You see the treasury line item there under sector allocation. Jennison has about 16% of US treasuries. Usually their fund would have about 37%. We've dug back into the history on that, and I would say for the last year, they've been slowly pulling away from US treasuries. For better or worse, obviously I think it's been for the better in the short term as investment yields with the treasuries have gone to near zero. But the negative side is they're pulling away from the benchmark that we want to measure them against, and it does change the makeup of the fund from what we originally understand it to be. So we just kind of call that out a little bit, may change our mind on, you know, how long or we want to hold on to Jennison if they're going to be further away from their benchmark, or if we're okay with what they've done to pull away from the benchmark. But that's just largely how we kind of track to make sure they're doing what we expect them to do. And so that's just the one thing I'd like to call out on that is a deviation from the benchmark that we like to kind of note. Continuing through, just another, on the next page, we can go to the bar chart. Not too much to pull out here, just kind of shows you where we are with actuals to policies and in total with the fund at 85.5 million at the time at June 30th. Continuing through, again, not a lot on the next page, kind of the same information. This will track out longer, the longer the fund is around. You see where we're tracking May and June in investment returns. That'll get much more interesting in the years to come as you can kind of track a 5 and a 10-year return and kind of see where that's going or where it's been throughout the years, but not much to call out right now. Continuing, yep, this page. One thing I'd like to call out on here is, you know, I'd said that the BlackRock fund tracks the S&P 500. There is a significant deviation from that in May of 2020. Completely unintentional, but just had to do with the trading dates and the purchase dates. We ended up buying into the fund a few days into May, and those couple of days took the May return, where you can see the S&P returned 4.7% and our fund returned 7.3%. Just with the volatility in the market, missing out on those 2 days took out 2 of the biggest negative days of the month. So our overall return is better, but you can see then we're in June, it's gotten back to where it's tracking pretty much 1-for-1 with the S&P as expected. Just a note on that, that was kind of interesting that we kind of lucked out with our timing on when the purchases actually went through. And just continuing through, not much on the next page. I'd like to really skip to page, it's marked as 16 of 23. It's just a description of what each of the funds are. I don't want to go too much into detail because honestly, oh, 1 page back. Yep. It's, you know, it gives you a good idea if you're if you're an investment person and you kind of want to read about this, this could, you know, definitely mean something more to you. I think the biggest thing I take out of it is, like I said, BlackRock is tracking the S&P 500 and Jennison is a separately managed portfolio. You know, it's a bond investment directive. So kind of gives you a general overview of what the funds are meant to do. I believe that's pretty much the end of the report. Is there any questions from anyone? Anything anyone wants me to try to highlight better?
None from me.
Okay, then I think we're on to the action item then of approving this to be included in our report to the executive committee. So President, we'll let you take it over from here.
Okay, so it's looking like we need I'm requesting a motion to, help me with this, Steve, to present the Finance Committee's report. Is this to the Executive Committee at our next meeting late in an hour from now? And I know I fumbled that, and I'll restate it, but I just want to make sure that's what the motion needs.
Just right, except for to the board at the meeting. So just a.
I apologize, you're going in and out.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes.
So you had to just right, except it's for the board. So I think it'd be a motion to present the finance committee report to the board of directors at its next meeting.
All right, thank you. So I'm requesting a motion to present the Finance Committee's report to the board of directors.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, Madam President. Let me scroll back up here again to the agenda. And we are on to regular agenda item.
Regular agenda item D1, draft budget and grant allocation to the city of Kalamazoo.
Big scroll coming up. I apologize to all viewers here.
No worries.
All right. Excellent. So the background on this is worth highlighting, and we will have a recommendation here requested at the end, which is to recommend, again, presenting the draft budget allocation at the next board meeting. The background here is the bylaw directive for the Finance Committee to meet prior to the September board meeting and speak with representatives of the city of Kalamazoo, discuss the need for funding for the upcoming year and its plans for aspirational projects. We've really been building the muscle memory over the last several years in repeating this process the same every year. We really follow the bylaws to the T and do this the same way every year. So what you'll see after today is that this draft memo will be included in the next board meeting's agenda. It'll be presented to the board with no action requested, but there will be opportunity for lengthy discussion as needed by all 16 board members and for feedback to be given to staff. After that, it'll be presented to City Commission at, again, an open meeting. Again, no action requested. That'll be an opportunity for feedback to staff and for dialogue with the Foundation for Excellence Board as well about potential inclusions, exclusions, scales, involvements in different projects and line items. After that, with an updated version, if needs be, the draft will be brought back to the board at its October meeting in accordance with the bylaws, and we'll have an action requested to include that the City Commission include the budget in its the allocation in its official budget. So at that point, then it's taken and it's represented as needed, really throughout November and December at the City Commission, and is adopted by motion of the City Commission in January, usually right after winter break, but depending on weather, of course, sometimes meetings can be delayed. So, so that's the process that we followed, and this is the very beginning of it. The items included in here are, in many cases, continuations or expansions of previous successful programming. In several cases, that will highlight new programs. And again, this is just sort of a first look at it, and then the actual presentation will be included in the September 14th board meeting for all board members to see. So I'll scroll here into the memo. As you can see, it's a draft, and the overall numbers that we're looking at are an overall grant to this for FFE activities of $25,786,361. and that includes $4.243 million for budget stabilization, just over $13 million for tax reduction to city property taxpayers, and then $8.5 million for aspirational projects. This is again consistent with previous years. The tax reduction is calculated as the difference that would have been collected between the two millage rates, and the budget stabilization is calculated as kind of an escalating factor that's derived from the municipal cost index. I'm going to scroll down here to the actual table, and is this legible? Because I'd like to downsize it just maybe one click if it's legible to people. Is that still readable? Okay. So here we have on the whole screen, you'll see the first fiscal year that we budgeted was 2017. We're now looking at 2021, which is in and of itself just a fantastic milestone to be looking at. You'll see in this previous column, there's been a total financial activity in support of this project of $95 million to the city. And with this year's grant allocation, we will very easily step into the $100 million plus benchmark, which is something really tremendous and astonishing when we rewind the tape to 2016 and think about this project being begun with passion and vision and hope. And here we are today looking at 2021, despite so many obstacles, not least of which has been this past year. So again, what we'll see is the three items, the three areas: the budget stabilization, which I just outlined, the tax reduction, which I just outlined, and then aspirational projects. And I'll go through the column here item by item and point out that we're continuing at the same level for lead water service replacements. This is one of these long-term projects that the FFE is in a position to help the city undertake. It's $500,000, and we expect between 70 and 80 homes again next year to have lead removed from the drinking water system. $1.7 million is being budgeted here for infrastructure. Again, long-term underinvestment and neglect of pedestrian infrastructure means that we're keeping $1 million level investment for sidewalks, which is a large portion of that. And then I can speak a little bit more to the other pieces when I go into the detail below. We have a small item here for park enhancements, which is a kind of a tactical improvement for the Youth Development Center. The engagement and activation, this is the line item that it's the budget that the staffer works with for creating each of the 23 neighborhood plans. And these neighborhood plans are the really street by street, block by block level involvement of all of our residents in all of our neighborhoods, or the opportunity for their involvement in making a block by block plan for their neighborhood, which feeds up into the Imagine Kalamazoo strategic vision, and out of which come a number of very specific programs that the FFE can help the city fund, and that the city can make improvements based on. The youth programs that we've had since the beginning will continue this year, and which is detailed below. There were obvious challenges with creating social distance between young people. I was really impressed by how an organization like My City through KRISA addressed that. And if you'll remember, there was a presentation from Paige, last name now Daniels, from KRISA at our last meeting, where she outlined the lengths that they were going to make sure that distance remote serving of that program was still going to be at the highest possible level. But we're hoping next year that we'll be back to normal, and even if it's a new normal, and we'll be serving Super Rec, All Things Possible, and My City as we had before. The Youth Mobility Fund remains in a positive balance. It was pre-funded, if you'll remember, because the demand can be so elastic. So that's at a basis that you should keep it going on the multi-year contract that we have with the partners in that program. Digital Access for All was, if you'll rewind to the spring, our work with Vaughn at the Promise, as well as the superintendents of Kalamazoo Public Schools and the leadership of Kalamazoo Public Library, to respond to the urgent need to help bridge the digital divide with Kalamazoo Public School learners. It was really highlighted by people having to learn at home. And so we jumped into that partnership to fund 1,000 hotspots for learners at KPS. And those were we started handout, I think it was 2 weeks ago now. And I believe they're still connecting with families and getting those hotspots out. So it's still a developing story right now as school kicks off. Shared Prosperity Kalamazoo, again, was pre-funded as a fund model. So they're working off existing continuing funds. So no new fund requests there this year. Economic Vitality and Affordable Housing are big programs, very big investments, and that's detailed below. I'll get there. But they're really continuing to expand and enhance the work that has begun over the past several years. So in economic development, we're talking about low to no interest grants or loans and grants. We're really trying to target women and minority businesses to the greatest extent we can in partnership with local organizations such as the United Way of Kalamazoo and Battle Creek region. Affordable housing, multiple tactics within the strategy of creating more housing stock, improving existing housing stock, and incentivizing the creation of stock and also improvement of policy where possible. Environmental responsibility here, you'll see this investment of $92,000 in continuing to audit homes in core neighborhoods for energy efficiency, and then working in a minority contractor education and certification kind of a format, which we've been doing last year to have that work done on those houses. So it's a pilot, relatively small, but big potential and great thoughtful work there. And then personnel continues. As you'll remember, last year's budget also contained then half of an FTE full-time equivalent for a deputy city manager who is really largely responsible for helping with FFE, as well as a grants coordinator and specialist. But those costs are continuing as projected over the next couple of years. You'll notice for projected expenses, we had this line last year, which I'll show at the bottom of this document. That's coming off this year because those are paid directly out of the endowment as planned now that the endowment is up and running. So that bottom line of $8.5 million for aspirational request, and then the total bottom line of about $25.8 million overall activity. So I'll scroll down here, and again, don't want to get ahead of us too far because we'll be presenting this to the board, but this document is available for you all to go through in detail. And I'll go down to the couple pieces that I spoke about earlier. Youth development, what we have here, you'll see some numbers reporting this year already. So 154 participants in my city, and 65% earned the retention bonus. An additional 20% took advantage of the opportunity to make up incomplete activities from previous weeks. So good level of detail there on how the programs function. I encourage you all to dig in. Each one had its own COVID challenges, and we're pretty proud of how the teams for each of these programs responded to make sure that we really kept serving the maximum number of people possible given social distancing to the maximum quality possible. Affordable housing and economic development. The two big lines here for economic development, business development fund, and some detail there on the activities that go into the business grants, technical assistance, and the small business program. Stay tuned on that. We'll have more information at the board meeting about how we've expanded the partnership with United Way from the successful rollout of the Kalamazoo Small Business Loan Fund this past spring. That partnership has really proven fruitful and very, very effective and very cost effective in deploying economic development funds. So I know that our teammate Antonio Mitchell over in economic development has really been crucial in getting that together and is very excited about its potential. And then neighborhood plan projects as well fit into that. Affordable housing, you see the 5 bullet points there. 2 that are kind of smaller, but interesting, and one that I just want to dwell on for a moment, because it highlights the work that is easily goes unsung, is highly technical in a way, and very kind of under the radar, and that's clouded title clearing. So this is, you could say it's in affordable housing, but really what it is it's kind of an asset and wealth building strategy. And the FFE invested $4,400 in the legal work required to work with families in core neighborhoods, particularly in this case, it was eight families or 8 estates where the home had been, didn't have clear ownership because its former owner was deceased. And so that wealth was essentially unowned by anyone. It's actually a more common problem than most people would think, one that most people, including myself, really didn't even know about. And so those estates were probated, and there were North Side, 1 in East Side, and 2 in Edison, I believe it was. And so those homes are now owned by the rightful heirs, who in some cases thought they owned them, but didn't because there was no actual legal will involved. So that created $334,000 of fair market value across those 8 estates that really didn't exist before. So the people who now have the homes, they couldn't have sold them before because they didn't technically own them. They couldn't have received any kind of federal assistance or a home equity loan because it wasn't theirs. So again, it's very under the radar work, but in terms of wealth building, the investment of $4,400 to create over $250,000 of value for eight families in core neighborhoods is really exciting for us. And the larger strategy of affordable housing, we'll be presenting this at length or greater length at the board meeting, looking at the strategies that we're continuing, and we'll have numbers of what's been built and rehabbed and what our plans are for the coming year. And I'm happy to, I'll actually look at Appendix B very quickly. This details that sum which will be paid out of the endowment for the first time. And costs are actually lower this year, which is largely because last year was an estimate, not knowing what the costs would be since they were first-time costs. We've now right-sized them and have a better estimate. And some of these will remain estimates because they are contingent on the amount of dollars invested and the amount of activity that occurs around those dollars by investment managers and their expenses. So Appendix B contains that information. And yeah, if there's any other questions on particular projects or details, or even recommendations on areas where you'd like to see focus at the board meeting presentation, now is the time. And what I'll do is scroll back up to the overall table here, just so we all have that in front of our eyes.
Director Carroll.
Thank you. I do have really one question. It's the same question, but it's on 2 different areas. But for the digital access for all, so this funded 1,000, the hotspots are serving 1,000 households. I'm wondering, do we have an idea of how many more households out there that don't have access and that need the access for their children?
It's a very good question. I would say we don't have the number, but we have the means and the plan to make sure that we're always finding out what it is.
Okay.
And Steve, I will just add to that, that the original KPS survey that they did warranted close to 4,000 responses. So about a little more than a third of the entire population in the Kalamazoo Public Schools. But as Steve mentioned, we're determining that need kind of on the ground right now. Who has what do they need? And it has just been, crazy for districts in the start. But to your point, the original survey came back, there were about 4,000 homes with little to no access, but it's been identified as about 700 at the start of the school year that have said, hey, I got to have this. We think it's going to grow.
Because to me, I think this is one of the most important programs that we're funding right now. And if there's any way we can continue as more how, and I totally understand how this is a bit of a moving target. It's such a complicated issue, but if there's some way that we can always, be there to make sure that those households get access, I would love for us to figure out a way to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, so in the short term, building on what Director Washington said, is so two things. One is, one survey said 4,000. The intake survey for the school year said 700. So, that's a really imprecise number. And then of those 700, how many will come get the unit or be available to receive the unit? We're really targeting those respondents to make sure that they are the priority recipients. Moving forward, each new class has, I'm sure Director Washington, correct me if I'm wrong, I think 900 approximately can have 900 students in it. So it's a churn of families. So you may have the same number over time, but the people who need the names behind the numbers change over time. And so with that, there can be, loss or breakage or inefficiency. So it's always going to be a moving target for us. But we're excited about the work as well. I'm very glad to hear you say that, Director Carroll, and really are sticking with it. And realizing too is that as a partnership with the Promise, with KPL, with KPS, and the Kalamazoo Community Foundation, which created a donor designated fund, I believe it's called, which can receive donations into it to help support the program.
Okay.
We just have to move ahead as a partnership and make sure that we're bringing all the resources we can to bear. But I'd be happy with staff to look at that and see, given that there is, some untapped potential in this allocation, to see if that number needs to be right-sized again before we make it final. If that's part of what I'm hearing. So.
Okay, and so then sort of the same question applies to the clouded title clearing that really caught my attention. I thought that was very interesting, and do we have a concept of how many people are in that situation in Kalamazoo?
So that's a really tough one. The work is done with the county treasurer.
Okay.
Because the county treasurer has or county treasurer's office, I should say, has the relationship based work with people and their homes. So it's the same relationship that we've used for the tax foreclosure program, tax foreclosure prevention, where we've gotten tax foreclosure preventions down to 0 multiple years in a row. So it's really like a counseling level relationship to understand so for example, they may have a clinic on financial health for your home. And that's where people come forward and say, hey, I have this challenge with my home, or I'm not really sure what happened when say my mother died, and I don't know if we had a will or not. So that's where that information kind of comes out.
Okay.
Our goal right now is 10 per year, 10 estates they'd be called per year. And then we'll see beyond that what demand is, and also then what, because it's very, very time intensive, right? These are essentially, we're probating an estate with legal assistance, not we, but the legal assistance that we use probates the estate, which can be very, very time consuming. You have to put out a notice for other potential parties that may have an interest in the estate. But again, very good to hear that you appreciate the work and find it exciting. So we're finding out, and I could anticipate over time, especially as people become aware of this and we link it into other programs about financial health, that demand grows, because it's not having a will is very, very, very common, and then not having a will and not going through the probate process, or I suppose any comparable process for determining the positive disposition of an estate, is also very common. So it stands to reason that there's some demand out there. But again, it's a home ownership is part of the bedrock of wealth for so many families, that again, it's a place we're interested in being. So.
Great, thank you.
Steve, could I ask a question about the subtitle Affordable Housing under Economic Vitality?
Yes.
I was under the impression that there were programming as part of Imagine Kalamazoo that would incentivize homeowners to rent to low-income Section 8, et cetera, individuals. And there's some process or protocol. There's some kind of way that we were going to increase housing for the most vulnerable populations by incentivizing homeowners. And I remember that in passing, and I can't remember what meeting. And my question is that something we'll hear more about? Because it wasn't necessarily outlined in the report, or is your report more broad stroked of what we'll hear later? Just where are we with that?
I'm very glad you couldn't be more timely. So
thank you.
One of your very esteemed, however, newer board members, Stephanie Hoffman, who's the executive director of Open Doors, we just met as part of just board development. She came on, as you know, in this last cycle.
Yes.
And she's interested in doing a housing presentation at the next board meeting.
Great.
So
Awesome.
she'll be, because her stance is people need to know what's going on, and we can tell people don't know what's going on. So we want to connect those dots. And so Director Hoffman, working with probably DCM Laura Lamb, Deputy City Manager Laura Lamb, who's really our affordable housing person, we'll work together to put a presentation together that's the right size for the board. So you can expect that at the September 14th meeting. And with that is, I think we're jogging the same memory, is what's called the Chapter 18 work. Mm-hmm. And Chapter 18 is still in the City Commission process toward approval. I believe the September 8th meeting is when the final approval is sought. I hope I'm not mistaken about that, but it's on the agenda at any rate. Very, very long process to change essentially the law that the city observes in regard to housing. And that is the mechanism where renters are incentivized in varying ways to be less discriminatory in lending, or excuse me, in renting, mm-hmm. and also putting supports in place to help those who are attempting to rent. This has been a long, passionate, I don't want to say struggle, but a big project.
Sure.
Yeah. The vision of Vice Mayor Patrice Griffin, Stephanie Hoffman, Isaac, mm-hmm. The Isaac Task Force for Housing, I believe in particular. And so that work is now coming to fruition. There's a lot to it, and Stephanie and certainly Laura, DCM Lamb, are much better able to speak to the detail than I am. But I think we're on the same wavelength of that work. And again, perfect timing. It's about to be requested for final approval, which means that all this stuff can kind of go ahead together into 2021.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any further questions? All right. Well, thank you very much. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. So it looks like the agenda is it public comment? If I'm remembering correctly.
I think we need to make a motion first.
Do we need to? Is there a motion? My apologies. Thank you, Director Carroll. I was so wrapped up in your exhaustive report, I was skipping over some steps. I entertain a motion to accept the Foundation for Excellence's, oh brother, the report. Help me out. I'm still processing what you're saying about incentivizing the housing, so I've lost my train of thought.
So moved.
The report by Steve. Thank you, Director Washington.
Okay. So
can I get some support?
Oh, support, sorry.
Any discussion? Seeing that there is none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for your grace, committee members. All right, as we are moving diligently through our agenda, we will call for public comments. Now, are these still pre-recorded and vetted prior to our meeting, or are we have people in a queue? Tell me about the process.
What did I see? Our IT support has just come off mute, so I believe he'll let us know if we have any comments or not.
Thank
So
you.
for this meeting, we take public comments via voicemail, just like city commission meetings, and we do not have any at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next to the agenda item, board member comments.
Just a thank you for all the wonderful work you're doing. It's so important in our community, and especially now, and it just really, I'm just so grateful for the wonderful staff support and certainly to the donors for having this vision and dedication to our community.
Yes, thank you, Director Carroll.
I would like to echo that sentiment and not excluding anyone, but wanting to lift up Steve Brown. He has been just a champ at the calls that he receives. I have come to him with a number of things, and he so graciously entertains them and then moves on so many of them. And moving on the Wi-Fi, the digital access for all piece, with swift urgency. I can't thank him enough for doing that and making sure this community is well taken care of. And really what you see in front of you with the digital access for all is a solution that is short-term, but in his desire, wanting it to be a solution that's permanent. And so I appreciate that attitude, that mentality, and him working with the rest of us, because when he does take this on, for a group and the 5 partners, he is an integral part
Yes.
of seeing that it moves. Without his input, we lose it. So thank you to Steve Brown. And then once again, Alyssa mentioned the donors. We can't thank them enough.
Yeah.
Bravo.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Washington. Thank you for all your sentiments. And thank you. I echo what everyone's saying and underscore the contributions of Steve and the rest of the staff. And also for our directors who, as we are all navigating the personal difficulties that we're facing through this COVID crisis and checking on family members and in each other and just making sure that we're creating a network of trust amongst ourselves. I just thank you all for repeatedly showing up and being here and taking time out of your busy schedules to help and do this work and enhance and operationalize this vision of the Foundation for Excellence. So I'm hoping and praying that you are all well and safe, as are your children, as we are adjusting continually to our new normal. So thank you all for everything that you do, truly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Seeing none, I will request a motion for adjournment.
So move.
Thank you so much, Director Carroll. Any support?
Support.
Thank you, everyone. For those of you who will be hanging up and dialing in, I'll see you in about 7 minutes or an executive committee meeting. The rest of you have a wonderful, safe, healthy, and happy day.
Thank you. You too.
Take care. Thank you.